So let's talk about the Epstein Files. The case has been in the headlines for years, right? But with thousands of new court documents being unsealed, the story has gotten way more complicated. Today, we're going to try and cut through the noise, decode what these files actually are, and hear what they tell us directly from the source.
Okay, so here's the game plan. We'll start with this massive flood of information that's coming out. Then we'll break down what we're actually reading. After that, we'll hear some of the voices from inside those documents, see how that info gets twisted and turned, and finally really dig into why going back to the original source is so important. All right, first things first, let's just set the scene here. The public interest in the story is, it's off the charts, and the courts are now releasing a tidal wave of documents.
Now, it's really important to get this straight. This is not some single, neat and tidy list of names. It's more like a series of document dumps, huge batches of files being released over time. And that, you can imagine, creates a really chaotic and challenging environment for anyone just trying to keep up. So we have this absolute influx of information. But what is it exactly? To really get the story, we first have to understand what we're looking at. And here's the key. The vast majority of these documents are depositions. This is not a dramatic trial you'd see on TV. Think of it as the evidence-gathering phase. It's where lawyers from both sides sit down with potential witnesses, put them under oath, and just ask question after question to get the facts down on paper.
And this quote, it really nails the difference. See, a deposition is about collecting the raw information, but a closing argument in a courtroom, like this prosecutor is saying, well, that's all about persuasion. It's about taking that information and spinning it into a story to convince a jury. What we have here is the raw material, not the final sales pitch.
And this is what it actually looks like. Check it out. You can see how formal it is, the date, the time, every lawyer's name, even the court reporter and videographer. It's a super meticulous, word-for-word record of every single question and every single answer. Okay, now let's get to the real heart of these documents. Let's actually listen to some of the voices, the firsthand accounts that were captured in these sworn testimonies. So here you have Johanna Schoberg describing the moment she first met Ghislaine Maxwell. She talks about how an offer to help Maxwell find a personal assistant suddenly became an offer for her to take the job, a decision that basically pulled her right into their world. And her testimony keeps going, placing all these key figures together in one place. In this quote, she's describing being on a plane with Epstein, Maxwell, and Virginia Giuffre, and she gives this really vivid first impression she had of Giuffre, who was another young woman in that circle. When the lawyers asked her about the other women who gave massages at Epstein's properties, well, her answer paints a really stark picture. She describes how different they all were, different heights, different hair, different backgrounds. But they all had one thing in common. They were all thin. It's a chilling detail. And, it's not just the accusers in these documents. This right here is testimony from a former employee, Alfredo Rodriguez. He's describing an atmosphere of pure fear and intimidation, saying right there on the record that even at 55 years old, he was afraid for his life. And the depositions show the deep, lasting damage. It's brutal. Here, a woman identified only as Jane Doe 73 talks about the severe psychological fallout, how it affected every part of her life for years and years, and how it was all ripped open again by public statements made much later. So we have all of this raw, direct, and really powerful testimony. But what happens next? How does this information actually get from these legal documents to you, to the public? Let's look at how the story gets filtered and framed out in the real world. And this is where you see this huge split, right? On one side, you have mainstream reporting. It tends to stick to the verifiable facts in the documents, like, hey, there are famous names mentioned. But on the other side, that exact same raw info can get sucked into the world of online speculation and end up reviving totally unrelated conspiracy theories. And this brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from all of this. There is a world of difference between reading the source document itself and reading a story about that document. And being able to navigate that difference is absolutely everything. Let's just break it down into 3 tiers. At the very top, you have the deposition. That's the primary source, the raw testimony. A step down from that, you have a news report, a secondary source. It interprets and summarizes that info. And then often, you have a third tier, online commentary, which is frequently just a reaction to the news report, putting you even further away from the actual evidence. And this whole situation leaves us with a massive question, one that's not just about this case, but about everything. In an age where we are just drowning in information from all sides, how do we do it? How do we separate the real, hard evidence from all the echoes and noise that follow?
Thanks for sticking with me through this one. You know, in a story this complicated and messy, sometimes the only way to really stay informed is to go straight to the source. Until next time.